This is good old boy Mike from Sips, Suds, and Smokes podcast, and you're listening to Pop Goes Your World.
If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes. And while you're there, please leave us a rating and review.
And now it's time for our feature presentation.
I'm Chris McBrien, and the pop culture from Generation X is everything to me.
And I'm Derek Myers, and I'm here to educate Chris on the great pop culture of today's generation.
Episode 245, Enter the Dragon Movie Review. Hey, I'm Chris McBrien along with Derek Myers, and you're listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations. So Derek and I recently thought it might be a good idea to take a look back at some films that are celebrating milestone anniversaries this year. And last time out, I nominated The Exorcist from 1973, since it was celebrating the 50th anniversary since its initial theatrical release. And Derek countered with another film celebrating 50 years, Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee. So we're going to get to our review of that movie shortly. But first, what pop culture have you been able to take in during the last week that you can educate me on, Derek?
Hey, Chris. I have a couple of old ones, a couple of new ones, good. And like a rewatch of a limited series. No documentaries this week, but I saw some good docs lined up dropping this weekend, so I should have something for next time. Nice. All right. This should not take long because some of these movies were kind of garbage. We don't have to waste a lot of time talking about them. But so from the 80s, yes. On the 80s Hollywood Suites channel, there were two movies on that I'd recorded in the last couple of weeks. I finally had a chance to watch. One was great. One was not. The great one was one of my favorites, Rodney Dangerfield in Back to School.
Oh, you love that movie, don't you?
I love this movie. I have definitely seen this movie 25 times or more. I love all the words, all the dialogue. I love Robert Downey Jr. is really young in this. He's got like blue hair. He's supposed to be like a troublemaker, a stoner guy. He's got a small part. It's pretty funny. But Rodney Dangerfield, never been better on screen. I love this movie a lot. You've seen it, I assume?
You know, I do believe that I have seen it maybe once all the way through, but it was a long time ago and I don't remember much about it, except he was doing like this funny dive.
That was the whole thing. While he's back to school, his son is on the diving team, so he ends up joining the diving team. Anyway, I like that movie. I don't know if we call it a guilty pleasure because I think it's a pretty decent movie, but no, I like it a lot. The other one I saw from the 80s, never seen it before. Mm-hmm. It had been recommended to me as possibly something we should review by our good friend Greg Martin. I don't know if he was being serious or not, but the movie is Krull.
I've never seen it. I've
never seen it before.
Like an old medieval thing kind of thing.
Yeah, it was sort of like a sci-fi space fantasy, like sort of think Star Wars ripoff. Like, how can we make Star Wars but not call it Star Wars? It was like they had like swords and armor, but the bad guys had laser guns, and the guy had like a magic weapon that was like a 5-pointed star thing where all the points curved and it came out to a blade, and it's like
that's what I remember about it, seeing that blade thing.
That's like in the poster, and it was just like, oh my god, it was awful. It was so bad. It was like not even so bad that it was good. You know, sometimes you look back, you're like, wow, this is campy. I could get it. No, it pass. Like, don't waste any time on it. Krull came, went, done. Anyway, that one wasn't great. Then I had a chance to rewatch the limited series from a few years ago, Chernobyl, on HBO. Chris, did you have a chance to see this when it came out a few years ago?
No.
You should definitely take the time to watch it. It's 5 episodes, or about an hour apiece. Part of the reason I went back and rewatched it, other than I remembered it being quite good, was there's a new show that's just started on HBO called The Last of Us. And it's getting very strong reviews, very good ratings. And it's written, the show's main writer is the same guy that wrote Chernobyl. So a lot of the reviews I'm listening to on the podcast and reading, they keep comparing it. And they're like, oh, yeah, So I was like, oh, yeah, let me go back and rewatch it. Watched it again, 10 out of 10 on the Chernobyl miniseries. It was great. I strongly recommend. I think a lot of people have already seen it, but if you haven't and it's on your watch list, definitely move it to the top of the list. It's worth your 5 hours. Then I had a chance to watch 2 brand new ones on Netflix. One good, one not so good. The not so good one is probably one that everybody saw on their recommends this week, and it's called You People. It stars Eddie Murphy and Jonah Hill, written by Jonah Hill and someone else whose name I can't recall. The little clips they show on the preview are amusing. And I thought, you know what? I like Eddie Murphy. I like Jonah Hill. I like, it seemed to be kind of like a decent movie. Jonah Hill plays a young guy who ends up dating a black girl whose father is Eddie Murphy. And of course, the main part of the main plot of the movie is here's this young, privileged Jewish white boy, and he marries this, or he's trying to marry this young black woman who is like self-made. She's had to like overcome obstacles and diversity, and it's just the culture clash between the two families who in their own way have their own points of view about the world and just can't see eye to eye with everybody else. And some of it is done for laughs, because some of it, when you look at it objectively, is quite funny, but a lot of it is just very cringy, and you're like, ooh, I can't believe they're doing that. Oh no, they're saying that. Oh, it's just like, I didn't care for it. And I really wanted to like this, but no, just, it's not for me. I didn't care for it. The performances were decent, but no, wasn't for me. And then the other new one that I watched that we liked was it's a Korean sci-fi film. It's called Jung-E, Jung_E. It almost looks like it's supposed to spell out jungle without the L, which is what I thought they were going for. And then as I watched it, I'm like, no, it's Jung-E. And it's this sort of, they build it as like a futuristic action sci-fi where they're trying to build the ultimate AI robot that they can send into combat. And you think, oh, this is going to be this movie about fighting and stuff. And at the beginning, there's a lot of like fighting scenarios where they show this AI in battle, but then you realize it's got like a fatal flaw and it can't overcome certain obstacles. And then the rest of the movie is more the character study of the scientists that are developing this robot, and the morality issues around it, and just the idea of artificial intelligence and how that would affect the world. It wasn't as much action oriented as I was expecting it to be, but I actually really liked the direction it took. It is in Korean, so you're going to have to watch it with subtitles unless you know and understand Korean, but I liked it. It was a winner for me. So a few good ones, a few bad ones this week. No documentaries. What about you, Chris? Do you have a chance to watch anything?
So I got two things I wanted to mention. One is, I believe it's pop culture related. It doesn't have to do with movies or TVs or, or shows or songs. It has to do with wrestling. But I've always felt like I was always a wrestling fan when I was a teenager, and I always liked the WWF. And I do believe it's part of pop culture. Leaping Lanny Poffo. Leaping Lanny Poffo? He died. So
I saw that, yes. Yeah. R.I.P.
And, I don't know if you know this, but he was Macho Man Randy Savage's brother.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so Randy Savage's real name is Randy Poffo. So they were brothers. And so Leaping Lanny Poffo, I remember they rebranded him at one point. They called him the Genius. And that was just dumb. He was Leaping Lanny Poffo. But the thing was, he was always like a jobber, a jabroni. He was like one of the guys that goes out there, just gets beat up. Right. But he had a shtick to him. Like he'd come out and he would like tell a poem, and then he would like throw frisbees out to the crowd and then just get beat up. And I actually had a chance to see him at Maple Leaf Gardens once in Toronto, and he was wrestling against Dino Bravo. And so I'll never forget it. It still stands in my mind. So Dino Bravo was like this bad guy, and he was Canadian as well. I think he was from Montreal. And he wore these like red tights, and he had like a little Canadian maple leaf, but it was like, like down, like, like on his scrotum, like right there. Okay. Anyway. And so Leaping Lanny Poffo comes out and goes, I'm going to tell a poem before, we wrestle. And I remember he said, Dino Bravo is a man that I can't admire until he wears his maple leaf a couple inches higher. And everyone laughed, and then Dino Bravo just beat the tar out of him. Nice. But anyway, Leaping Lanny Poffo died. I thought he was pretty good. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, I was talking at the top of the show how we reviewed the Exorcist on our last show. So if you haven't had a chance to listen, it was episode 244. So feel free to go back and give that a listen, because apparently a number of people did listen to that episode of the podcast, because I got lots of feedback on it, Derek.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, in regard mostly to my pronunciation of the title, The Exorcist. So apparently I pronounce it Exorcist, like eggs, like as an eggnog. And I think I seem to recall you making a remark about eggs when we were recording the show, right, Derek?
I think it was something to do with your dad joke. If I had to guess.
Oh, because I remember at some point you had mentioned eggs, and I was like, "What's eggs got to do with this?" But I just want to say, in my defense, it's not my fault that I pronounce The Exorcist like it's a dish at like Denny's or IHOP or something. It's not my fault. It's because I'm Canadian, and we just pronounce stuff weird. So, and you, Derek, you cannot just tell me that's not true because you don't pronounce it that way, because you're not really a true Canadian because you're a Boston Bruins fan.
Oh,
so,
well, I am a Boston Bruins fan. I'll definitely give you that. But I was going to say, I don't think I pronounce it that way. I think I do Exorcist. But you know probably why I say it that way is because to me that's like a Dungeons and Dragons term. So that's my familiarity with the word and the term. So that's probably why I don't say it the way you say it. But whatever, it is what it is. I mean, hopefully at least people had some constructive criticism about the show. Other than that, did they like it? They obviously listened enough to know that you weren't saying it the way that it should be said. But
I got lots of positive feedback on the show, just not the way that I pronounce The Exorcist. But I just want to say it's because of my Canadian accent. So the thing is, in addition to The Exorcist, we're also going to be reviewing a few other movies soon. And I just want to let you know, Down and Out in Beverly Hills, National Lampoon's Animal House, and of course, A Boot Last Night. So just keep that in mind. And again, it's all about my Canadian accent. Not that I think The Exorcist is about eggs.
Don't you mean it's a boot, your Canadian accent?
It is. It's a boot.
Here's your dad joke of the week.
Well, since we're reviewing Enter the Dragon this week, I thought that I would do a related dad joke for you. Okay?
Oh boy, please tell me this is not going to be extremely racist and offensive.
No, I don't.
Okay, good. I'm already worried for where this is going to go.
Jeez. Derek, did you know that Bruce Lee has a brother who is unable to lie?
I did not. What is his name?
His name is Honest Lee.
Honestly, that is a terrible joke.
Oh, honestly, Derek, honestly.
Roger Moore is James Bond.
I think it's really funny that you can say octopussy, but you can't say
hey, this is not cool.
I was a real nerd.
No kidding. Here's a song. Oh,
stop playing that damn. Stop it.
I was like, oh my God, what's going on here, dude?
Your wife has got great taste in pop culture.
They're definitely phony baloney, but you just have to accept them.
I mean, she's no Ryan Reynolds.
This is what's big now.
Back in the day.
You can look at me all you want, but you're not touching me because you're a gross old man.
Okay, so Derek, in honor of celebrating 50 years since its release, I went with The Exorcist last week. If you're Canadian, it's Exorcist, apparently. This week, it was over to you to pick a movie that turns 50 this year, and you went with Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon. You mentioned your pick at the end of our last episode. It caught me by surprise a bit, I will say. Like, I expected you to go with, American Graffiti. I thought for sure that'd be your choice.
Yeah, I'd never seen it, so I've been kicking that around.
Yeah. And I even thought like The Sting or Papillon. So why did you go with Enter the Dragon? Start us off with that.
So at the end of the last episode, I sort of leaned on this a little bit. I did think about The Sting, which I feel is a great movie, and I've seen many times, but not recently.
It is.
But The Sting takes place in the 1930s. Even though the movie is 50 years old, it's a movie that took place well before the time in which it was filmed. And American Graffiti, same thing, was from the early 60s, even though the movie is from 1973. So I wanted a movie that was more set in 1973. If we're going to do a movie that's 50 years old, I want it to look like the world did 50 years ago, not the way the world looked 90 years ago, even though it was made 50. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Makes sense.
So when I looked at the list of movies that were turning 50 that I wanted to possibly dive into, this one jumped out at me in part because I hadn't seen it in a long time. I had seen it once or twice before, but it had been a long time, probably the mid to late 90s. In fact, I have a DVD copy of this, which is what I watched for the review, and it was the 25th anniversary of Enter the Dragon. So it was from 1998, and that is probably the last time I saw it was when I bought the DVD. I probably watched it the day I bought it, and then maybe one more time within the year of that, and there's no way I've seen it since then. So it gave me a good excuse to go back and revisit it, and this is not the typical kind of movie we tend to review on this podcast. And I wanted to sort of venture out of our comfort zone a little bit and, take it in a slightly different direction. And honestly, I didn't know if you had seen it before or not, or like me, if maybe you were familiar with it or had seen it a long time ago. But so let's dive right in. Had you seen it before?
I had never seen this movie before. So I just want to say kudos, bud, because even if it's not new stuff, you're still educating me. You're still finding ways to educate me on pop culture. So thank you very much. Okay, so I was never a big fan of martial arts movies. I got to be honest. With the exception,
me neither.
With the exception of Kill and Kill Again from 1981. I love that movie. But I actually really, really, really liked Enter the Dragon. I thought it was good. As a film buff, I feel like it's like this movie has its place in history. If you think about it, it was the first martial arts film ever done by a Hollywood studio. And it obviously inspired a whole slew of martial arts films in the 70s. I remember when I was a kid, I used to always watch the movie channel. I've mentioned that lots of times. And they used to play these martial arts movies on there. Every month there'd be like a different one they'd play. And for some reason, I even remember the title of one of them. It was called Shaolin Handlock. And they were always dubbed in English. And the only reason I ever watched them at all was there was always at least one nude scene in them. And when you're 11 years old in 1981, if you're guaranteed to see some boobs, let me tell you, you're watching martial arts movies,
Sure.
So, but I never really liked any of them, boobs notwithstanding. So going into this movie, I didn't think I was going to like Enter the Dragon all that much, but I really, really did. It has a lot more going for it than those other martial arts movies ever did. The direction was stylistic. Bruce Lee was just amazing. The fight sequences were crazy. And of course, there's boobs. So I liked it a lot. So
yeah, thanks. No, I felt the same way. My wife and I watched it together. Again, she and I probably watched it together when we bought the DVD and hadn't watched it since. And after I turned her and I said, like, that was really good. Like, that was way better than I remember it. She's like, yeah, she goes, that movie really does hold up after 50 years. Like, obviously there's things in it that are dated just because it's a 50-year-old movie. But yeah, we were both sort of like nodding our head going, man, that was really, I almost texted you because we watched it like 2 or 3 nights ago and I was about to text you and say like, man, this movie is really, really good. But I knew you said you hadn't seen it before. And I thought, I don't want to taint your viewing thing. I don't want you to go into it thinking, well, this is the greatest movie ever. And then be like, oh, this movie kind of sucked. Now, did you watch it with one or both of your kids?
No, I just watched it on my own.
Okay, because I know I suggested that. I thought, oh, maybe your oldest might enjoy it. So
no, I didn't, and I'm glad that I didn't. My wife would not have been happy, and we'll get into that in a bit. But sure. So just I want to get into some details of the film. We'll just set this up. So it was released in the United States on August the 19th, 1973. It was directed by Robert Klaus, who really didn't do a whole lot else, unless you count the martial arts blaxploitation film Black Belt Jones, starring Jim Kelly from Enter the Dragon. And Scatman Crothers was in that one too. So was Marla Gibbs from The Jeffersons and Ted Lang. He was Isaac on the Love Boat. They were all in that movie. And I think that was like kind of like Black Belt Jones was supposed to be kind of a follow-up, if you can call it that, to Enter the Dragon. Or at least I think it tried to exploit the success of Enter the Dragon because they even used the tagline, Enter Jim the Dragon Kelly. It was on the movie poster for that one. So anyway, but Robert Klaus, so he really only did Enter the Dragon and then Black Belt Jones. And so he directed this, and it starred Bruce Lee, John Saxon, and Jim Kelly, really in the major roles. It was made on a budget of only $850,000, but it grossed over $21 million at the domestic U.S. box office, and it took in over $400 million worldwide. It was a huge hit. So domestically at the U.S. box office, it finished 13th for 1973 with $21 million, like I say. But a couple things that I want to talk about this movie right off the top. So first of all, the title. I'm not really sure what it means or what it has to do with the plot or anything in the movie for that matter. It sounds a little bit more almost like a like a title of a 70s porno or something.
Jeez, wow.
I'm like, and then when the movie opens up during the opening title sequence, the music starts playing and it sounds like something from a 70s porno, almost like. Not quite like that, but
Wow.
by the way,
I could hear the mustache.
that is, by the way, Derek, that's one film genre we've never reviewed here on the podcast. And I don't imagine that we ever will. Although, I would like to point out, Behind the Green Door is celebrating its 50th anniversary too. So I might just have to nominate that. Just kidding. Although, you know what does turn 45 this year? Debbie Does Dallas. I don't know. We might be onto something here. Could you imagine if we did that? It'd be like, hey, Derek, let's talk about the cast from Debbie Does Dallas.
I think I found it on Disney Plus.
Yeah, let's talk about the cast a little bit. What's Mr. Greenfield these days? Anyway, okay, digress. So, Enter the Dragon. One thing that got me about this movie right away, other than the title and then the opening music, it is so obviously dubbed.
Oh yeah, that was one of the things that at first was really troublesome, but I got past it pretty quickly. And I read up on it after. They said that the entire movie they had to redo all the dialogue and all the audio afterwards. And I got to think, as you had mentioned earlier, it's budget at a very limited budget, and they had a hard time getting all of the equipment and the hardware and the cameras and the sound and all that stuff. All the hardware they needed to actually make the movie, they ran into tremendous difficulties. So I think they just realized very quickly on, we have the capability of putting audio in after the fact. Let's just do it that way. So yeah, but you notice it pretty quickly. And in part, especially in the opening sequence, there's like the master of the master of the monastery, the teacher. To me, I got the sense that English was clearly not his first language, and he probably didn't speak very well. And when I was reading through, they said that he didn't speak a word English, and they had to just phonetically give him the line so that his lips were sort of moving in the right area, and then they just had somebody else do the English voiceover. But it is what it is. This
film played like an ADR technician's dream project. But the thing is, let's be honest. Most films are shot without using the original sound. Like, it makes sense not to use it, you know? There's wind and there's all kinds of ambient noise going on. And so the original sound that's recorded, it's kind of useless in most movie productions. If you think of something like Star Wars, it's almost entirely ADR as well. The actors that are in the costumes, they never got their on-set dialogue into the film. It was all done in post.
No, of course not.
They just ran their voices through synthesizers and stuff, and they used Foley for all the sounds. But the thing was, in this film that was a little bit different, was they didn't even record sound from the original footage. Nope.
I didn't know that.
All dialogue done in post, and they used ADR. And Derek, you've mentioned before, ADR is kind of a pet peeve of yours, right?
Sometimes, yeah, if it's done poorly. Again, the movie's 50 years old, so I gave it a pass on a lot of that stuff simply because you can't use today's level of technology and sophistication and say, hey, we can do a better job than that with the tools we have at our disposal. Of course we can. There's been 50 years in advances of technology. Given in the 1970s, like this was even before Star Wars and all the things Lucas brought to the table. So it's like I gave it a very broad pass on some of those technical issues, and I just admired it for the rest of what it was. I was annoyed by the way that sometimes the audio didn't seem to sync up properly, but 5 minutes in, I got used to it. I was like, you know what, I'm not going to dwell on that part of the movie. I'm just going to enjoy it, and I did.
And just for clarity, ADR is automated dialogue replacement, where they basically just loop the film back over and over while the actors sort of re-record the dialogue. They try and sync it all up on the film. It's an old technique. But so the thing with this movie is, like, you know, you've got some of the cast, like you mentioned, some of the cast is speaking English originally. So their lips sync up to the dialogue. And then you've got other people in the cast, like the teacher, like you mentioned, who, and Han also later on, who spoke all their original lines in Chinese because they didn't speak English. So the English dubbing doesn't sync up. So it kind of comes off as a little bit distracting, especially in that opening scene, like you mentioned, right?
Yeah. But I mean, for me, looking like, again, I'm much like you. Martial arts movies not really my thing. I've seen a handful of them when I was younger. They used to be on TV a fair amount, so you'd watch them from time to time. Not really something, not a genre I'm overly familiar with, but many of them, when they aired in North America, were clearly made in China. And they just dubbed over them in English because they're like, hey, how can we make some money off of this movie that is already completed? Well, let's just do a new audio recording, throw it, and then put it in the U.S. market. So for me, the fact that when the dubbing doesn't look right, like, to me, that's just a part of how a lot of these martial arts movies were presented to the North American audience. And it's almost like that nostalgia factor to me when I see a martial arts movie where the dialogue doesn't sync up because clearly they're speaking in another language, and usually it's in Chinese. It's like, oh, well, that's the way that works. And you forgive it because usually it has incredible fight sequences, and you're like, well, that's what I'm here to see. I'm not here to I don't really give a crap about the story. Oh my God, you kidnapped this person. Oh, well, now we're gonna have a big fight, and then you have this awesome fight scene. It's like, well, going back to your porno thing, I don't care why they're doing it. I just want to see them doing it. It's like, I don't care why they're fighting. I just want to see them beat each other up.
The thing is, though, those actors that originally spoke their lines in Chinese, the dubbed voices really don't match them.
No, you're absolutely
so
right.
Like the teacher at the beginning, like you mentioned, his dubbed voice sounds exactly the same as Marduk from Kill and Kill Again, a white guy.
I was going to say, I thought he sounded like a black guy, to be honest. But I mean, maybe that's just me being, overly critical.
And then Han, he's this older Chinese guy, and his dubbed voice, it sounds like a TV weatherman from Indiana or something like that. It just doesn't match up. But one thing I wanted to mention about this film, because it has had a lot of influence, on films after it. This film basically started the craze of martial arts movies in the 70s. Movies like Shaolin Handlock that I mentioned in 78, all the way up to my beloved Kill and Kill Again in 1981. It influenced all those. And I think you could actually make the argument that this movie also influenced the Bond films of the 70s.
No question whatsoever. To your point, it partly, when a movie's going to make as much money as this one made internationally, people take notice. We talk about this all the time on this podcast. Why did they make a sequel? Why did they make a reboot? Why did they do this and that? 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, it's a dollars and cents decision. If we do this, we have a better chance of making more money. Well, when you saw how much money this movie made, of course you're going to look to it for influence and try to make other movies replicate some of the keys for success. So with something like James Bond, or many of the action movies that came out in the later 70s and early 80s, of course you're now going to have these elaborate fight sequences because people clearly liked it. One of the things that I always felt this movie was also influential on was the introduction of the nunchucks. That was like a martial arts weapon that I had never been familiar with until I saw some of these movies. And of course, I remember growing up, there was always some kid at the school that had nunchucks and was all like, look at this, I got nunchucks. And it's like, it was because he watched these martial arts movies, had parents who didn't give a crap. We're like, yeah, you want that? Sure, we'll buy it for you for your birthday. And it was like, really? But I don't know.
I think this movie also had a huge influence on directors. And I'm thinking mainly of Tarantino. I think, Tarantino must have just loved this film and obviously incorporated it into some of his work, especially in Kill Bill and stuff. But yeah. I wonder, Derek, you're a fan of newer pop culture. Do you think Enter the Dragon is still an influence on movies today?
Sure. I think not directly, because I think that in the 50 years since this movie came out, so many other movies have built upon the foundation it created. So, if you said something like, oh, well, this movie that came out was influenced by The Matrix, and it very well might have been influenced by The Matrix, then you think, yeah, but what do you think inspired some of what you see in The Matrix? That can trace a line clearly back to Enter the Dragon. So It's like, it's not that a movie today is looking at this 50-year-old film and saying, we're doing that. They're looking at the other things that have come out more recently and saying, these things are great, let's continue to do that or build on that. maybe don't realize that those things themselves have, if you trace the line back far enough, they're going to go all the way back to this.
So I think it's really fair to say that Enter the Dragon is not just some cheesy martial arts movie with bad dubbing. Like, there is a lot going on here. And I think one of the most interesting aspects of the film, for me at least, is the cast. So let's talk about the cast. So we'll start with Bruce Lee, obviously. That's where we got to start.
Obviously.
One of the things that sets this movie apart from all the other cheesy martial arts movies that came out even before it out in Hong Kong and stuff, and that came out after it in the States and stuff. What set it apart was Bruce Lee. He himself helped set this movie apart. And like I say, I have to be honest, I was never a huge fan of this genre. So I was never a Bruce Lee fan. Not because I didn't like him, but because I just didn't really know all that much about him. But, thanks to you, Derek, and making me watch this movie, I felt like I needed to do some digging on him and find out, like, what made him so special. Because I think some people just put him on this pedestal, like he's this god, right? So basically, he started the idea of mixing different disciplines into one set of martial arts. And it was called Jeet Kune Do. And it combines these elements of boxing and fencing and jiu-jitsu with like intellectual concepts. And it takes more of a defensive approach, and it's all about being fluid and responsive and things like that. But it's not just his new form of martial arts that made him different. Holy smokes, was he cut?
Oh my God, yeah.
Oh my God.
And this is in a time. So this is the comment my wife. Well, she pointed out, and I had to agree with her 100%. We were saying, like, his body was as perfect as it could be physically, like just the way he was cut. And you got to think, this is before like bodybuilding became a thing. Like, you look at professional athletes from the 70s, even into the early 80s, and like they don't have the kind of muscle tone that they have today. No, because back then they didn't understand the importance of like nutrition and bodybuilding and working the certain muscle groups and all that. Like, the knowledge was probably there, but I remember reading some stuff about Arnold Schwarzenegger where he was working out with like basketball players, and the coaches for the basketball teams were like, you guys can't be lifting weights. Like, that's going to affect your performance negatively. So like there was a whole stigma around like the bodybuilding stuff, but you see how toned this guy is. And like, you could tell every muscle on his body was as fit as it could be. And oh my God, this guy looks amazing. And considering his slight build too, right? Like he's not that tall, not that broad, but oh my God, what a perfect specimen to see on screen. And even when he was, half the movies run around with no shirt on. I kept saying that. I go, if I look that without my shirt on, I wouldn't wear a shirt either. But like, even when he was at the beginning where he meets with the British agent and he's like wearing a suit, like even though it was the 70s fashion, like, my God, those collars, like, what were they thinking? But like I said, like, look how striking he looks in this suit. Like, my God, this man his body is in perfect shape. Like, it's, wow, you can't say enough good things about it.
And probably dying young helped feed into the lore of, Bruce Lee too, right?
Well, of course, right? It's that whole, live hard, live fast, die young, leave a beautiful corpse. Not that that was his mentality whatsoever. It was completely accidental death. But I think it just builds on that idea of like, the famous person who dies before they reach their peak, before they reach their prime. And then you have this legacy, this legend that grows. And I think that's definitely the right word with Bruce Lee, is legend for sure.
And his son, Brandon Lee, died young too. He was filming the movie The Crow in 1994. He was accidentally shot by a loaded prop gun on set and he died. Alec Baldwin was apparently his co-star in The Crow.
Oh my.
Is it
Jeez.
too soon?
Too soon, man. Yeah, too soon.
Okay. So Bruce Lee started out, his first big role was actually on TV in The Green Hornet from 1966 to 1967. And that show actually did some crossover episodes with Adam West's Batman.
I was going to say, it was a spinoff of Batman, yeah.
Yeah, and Bruce Lee was Kato on The Green Hornet. So that helped make him famous. And then he made a couple of movies in Hong Kong. He made The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and The Way of the Dragon with Chuck Norris. And all of them were like these huge hits overseas. So Warner Brothers, the studio, kind of sat up and took notice, right? And they were like, we need to get involved with these Hong Kong studios. All right. And they did. And that's when they kind of collaborated and they made Enter the Dragon. And this was Bruce Lee's sort of introduction to U.S. audiences as a U.S. produced film, right? And then he was actually working on a couple of other projects when he died in 1973. So things kind of started when he was doing ADR loops for Enter the Dragon, and he collapsed. And he had a seizure and he had headaches. So he went to the hospital, and then the doctors there, they diagnosed him as having cerebral edema, which is basically this condition where excess fluid accumulates around the brain, I guess. And then 2 months later, he started having headaches again, and he went to lay down for a nap, never woke up. He was pronounced dead. And that was July the 20th, 1973. So he actually died before Enter the Dragon was even released theatrically.
Yeah.
Again, probably helping to drive word of mouth of the film.
Absolutely.
The box office.
Absolutely. I'm sure that was a big factor, especially in the U.S., the idea, because, again, it was an unknown commodity. It was a genre that was not popular. But I think the legend around it, the mythos, the idea that here was this young guy in the prime of his life, he could do things nobody else could do. This film is unlike anything you've seen before, and unlike anything you're ever going to see again, because this guy's gone. This was his one and only shot. And then, of course, you realize he had made all these other movies in China years before, and it's like, well, let's just re-release all those movies now that he's famous and make more money. So
yeah, there was a lot of things, obviously, about Bruce Lee that made him unique. But I think you have to think that his death sort of added to that mystique. So it kind of immortalized him, as
yes,
mythical
that's
figure,
a good way
right?
to think of it. Yeah,
I remember there was this movie, I think it might have been Canadian, and it was back in the 80s, called They Call Me Bruce.
Yes.
It starred Johnny Ewan, and it was basically, he was this guy that looked like Bruce Lee. So everybody called him Bruce. And then they even made a sequel to it. They Still Call Me Bruce.
Yeah.
And the movies, especially the original, it was quite a big hit, for such a crappy low budget movie. But I think it just goes to show just how much people could sort of cash in on Bruce Lee's legend, But anyway, so moving on from him, John Saxon is another guy. He played Roper. And in the film, he's this gambling addict, and he owes all this money to the mob. I'm assuming for gambling debts.
I would assume so.
And one thing that stood out to me about John Saxon, he's kind of a weird looking guy. He's got this chiseled look to his face. And I was like, something's not right about this guy. What is it? And then it hit me. He reminds me of one of those marionettes in Thunderbirds.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's a good
Go back and watch any scene that he's in, and you will never unsee it. You'll totally get it. He looks like one of those marionettes. He's like a weird looking guy. And he actually went on to do a couple of TV spots in the 70s. Derek, do you have any guess as to what show that John Saxon appeared on in 1976?
I'm going to guess The Love Boat.
Nope, I'll give you a hint. He played Captain Rattle in a 2-part Wonder Woman episode. It was called The Feminine Mystique in 1976. Okay. Not the Feminine Mystique. No, it was the Feminine Mystique. In case anyone listening thinks I'm mispronouncing it due to my heavy Canadian accent. Then another guy I want to talk about is Jim Kelly. So he went on to play Black Belt Jones, sort of the follow-up to this movie, if you will. Well, not really, because he dies in this movie, but it's the same director, totally cashes in on the success of this movie. But other than that, he didn't really do much else. Like, he was also in 3 the Hard Way, but that's pretty much it. I liked him in this movie. I think one of the things that I liked about this movie, too, is how it kind of breaks down some stereotypes around martial arts. You tend to think, that this cast of this movie would just be all Asian. But you've got this Caucasian with John Saxon. Well, he's a marionette, I guess. And you got this black man in Jim Kelly. And both of them are really good at martial arts. So The thing is, I don't know if it was an intention, by the filmmakers to try and break down stereotypes, or if it was just because the studio wanted to appeal to more North American mainstream audiences, But I think regardless of the motives that they had, this multiracial cast helped make this movie just seem like a bit more groundbreaking. Remember, it was 1973, right?
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right there. I think they knew if they wanted to break into the American market, which was absolutely, from my understanding, a big part of how and why this movie was financed, was the idea that this will be the movie that breaks the barrier. They needed to have an American like a white American man featured prominently in the movie, which John Saxon does. And then by having Jim Kelly in there as well, you're like, okay, it's, to your point, it's not just a movie that's about Chinese people that features all Chinese actors. That's going to be a much harder sell in 1973 America. But, you have a white guy and a black guy in there as well that are actually, demonstrated in the course of the film that they can hold their own. I think that was a big selling feature for the movie. And I think it certainly helped its success.
I will say that Jim Kelly's afro was epic.
Loved it.
Oh my God. He looks like Link from the Mod Squad. He looks like Angela Davis doing martial arts, for crying out loud.
But again, I mentioned about Bruce Lee. Jim Kelly, man, he looked fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Again, the scenes, like the non-fighting scenes where the guys it shows their backstory and it shows them like coming to the island and stuff. Like, these guys clearly in real life were in phenomenal shape.
Oh, yeah.
And I was reading how part of the reason these three guys were cast is because they already had some ability as competent fighters. And like when you're that good, clearly it's that whole thing. My body is a temple. And even, in the movie, Bruce Lee, he's offered alcohol a few times and his character turns it down. I got to believe in real life, he probably didn't drink that much if he was, that fit. But you definitely get that impression. Jim Kelly coming around, it's like, man, this guy is also in phenomenal shape and just exudes like style and confidence. Again, if I had a body like these guys, I'd exude confidence too.
You mentioned style. So one of the things that sets this movie apart, it keeps it, from being this schlocky, cheesy martial arts movie, is the style of the filmmaking to me. The director, Robert Klaus, he's interesting because he wasn't some prolific or great director from the 70s. Like, he didn't really do much else, like I mentioned before. But he injects a certain style into this movie that totally sets it apart. So I actually, when I was watching, I made a list, and you can add to this as well, of some examples of the stylistic elements in this film. So I'll get started with a couple here. The early scene where Bruce Lee and Braithwaite are watching a film about Han, and they're sitting in that dark room. You mentioned where he's wearing the suit. Yep. And the film projector is going, and the light source in the room is like passing through the reels of the film projector, and they're spinning this shadow all around Bruce Lee. Very cool effect. When the goons chase that girl and they eventually get her in that abandoned shed, and she grabs that shard of glass to kill herself, like, rather than let them have their way with her or whatever. The director shows the shard of glass pointing directly at the camera as if she's holding it. Again, I thought was very, very cool effect. Any stylistic elements that you thought were cool?
I mean, I don't have notes on it, but I did think and we'll probably get into it in a little more detail. The final sequence where the fighting all happens in the Hall of Mirrors.
Yes,
that to me, like,
so
not only did was it a cool visual, but I got to imagine shooting that took a tremendous amount of prep work because I was specifically trying to see if the camera appeared in the reflections, and I didn't see it. I mean, obviously I was focused on the fight sequence as well, but that's always a danger when you have a scene with a lot of mirrors and reflective surfaces. Is how do you make sure that the camera and the cameraman and the sound operator and all the people that are, quote, behind the scenes aren't actually in the movie? And I mean, in today's day and age, the cameras can be so small and you can digitally erase things that aren't supposed to be there. But again, 1973, 50 years ago, you don't have the luxury of doing that kind of thing. You need to just get it right you need to shoot what's in front of you, and it needs to be right the first time, or, you're going to have to reshoot it. So just the know-how and the ingenuity to put that scene together in a way that still makes sense, is still interesting to watch, is still like action and suspenseful and not actually give away the camera itself, to me, that was like the real tip of the cap. Like, man, these guys either got extremely lucky or they really knew what they were doing.
And the end of that scene too, where there's that spinning door with Han impaled on the pole, it's just going around.
Awesome.
Around. Like, it's just so well shot. So a couple other things that stood out to me in terms of style. Color. The way that this film uses color, especially with the costumes, they tend to be monochromatic, and it's like based on who the characters are, kind of where they fit into their place on the island. Like Han's men are all like dressed in white, and the visiting fighters are all in yellow. The prostitutes are all in purple, you know? And then there was
the prisoners are all in black.
Right. There was one overhead shot of Han's palace with all the bird cages. Yes. And it totally made me think of this, that it had to inspire John Woo when he made Hard Boiled. I don't know if you've ever seen that film. So good.
It's been a long time. God, I actually have the DVD. I haven't watched it in a long time.
Quite good. And then in that same scene, the entire palace freezes. Everybody in there freezes when Han enters and walks through. And then as soon as he exits the room, they all go back to moving and walking and talking again. It's just like kind of a stylistic element, you know? And then even when the bird cages break and the doves are like flying all around Han and Jim Kelly when they're during their fight, like there's just so many thematic elements in this film. And there's a lot of good scenes in it too. So I would like to talk about a couple scenes in this film that I really liked. So one that stood out to me, I made a note, and I just call it the Jamaican dojo. So at one point, Jim Kelly goes into some dojo. And now I just want to keep in mind, Derek, I want to set this up. I know nothing about martial arts.
I mean, neither do I.
Or should I say I know nothing about martial arts. But basically, my knowledge of dojos is limited to like what I've seen in The Karate Kid and on Cobra Kai. Okay, so I'm no expert. And so I freely admit that. But in this scene, there's this dojo with a bunch of Jamaican guys. And like one of them, I guess he's like the class leader, the sensei or whatever he is. He's wearing this like wool Rastafarian cap. And again, I'm no expert. I don't claim to be. But I have never heard of a Jamaican martial arts guy. Jamaicans seem a little laid back for martial arts to me. Like I would think if somebody started karate kicking in Montego Bay, a Jamaican dude would be like, you know, hey man, take it easy man. Stop your karate kicking. Let's just be jamming till the morning light, man. You know, like it just that whole scene just seemed weird to me. I don't know. You know what I mean?
I know the scene, and I remember when I watched it again. I sort of even said it to my wife. I'm like, why are we seeing this scene here? Like it almost felt like there was a part missing. Like they filmed the scene, and maybe there was supposed to be an additional part of dialogue where there was some interaction that we didn't quite get all of, but they didn't want to cut it out entirely. It just, to me, it felt incomplete, I don't want to say unnecessary because it was during like the sort of the flashback of Jim Kelly's character, like who he was, you know, where he was going, what his troubles were, why he was like, what he'd done before he got to the tournament. So I think they were like trying to establish a little bit of his backstory. So you couldn't really just chop the whole element out. You needed to have it establishment, but I just felt something felt like it was missing.
One scene I really liked was on the golf course when the mob goons come there and they try to threaten Saxon to get him to pay their boss's money or whatever. These guys look nothing like mob goons. They've got these.
Well, I mean, it's 1973, so your preconception of what a quote mob goon should look like probably very different back then.
But the cheesy 70s mustaches and those bad suits, they look like they stepped off the set of another kind of film. They just didn't look like mob goons to me. So another one was the praying mantis fight. When they're on the ship and they're going to Han's Island and they're betting on those two praying mantises in the fight. And it's like, those are really two praying mantises that are fighting each other. Like it's like an insect snuff film. You know, there's no disclaimer in the credits. No praying mantises were hurt in the making.
I was just about to say that. I don't think there was one of those SPCA things, Humane Society things at the end that said no one was harmed in the film.
It kind of stuck out to me. So another thing was Han's army when they get to the island. There's this whole army of martial arts fighters or soldiers or whatever you call them. And they're all like lined up and they're doing these drills, like they're kind of punching in the air. This seems to be a pretty common movie trope in martial arts movies, and it's used in my favorite, Kill and Kill Again. Marduk's Army does this. But it seems like something that just keeps recurring in those kind of kung fu movies of the 70s, but I'm assuming it started here. I don't know though for sure, but it struck me as being like another way that this movie is influential.
Well, I mean, again, I don't know anything about it specifically, but I got to think that that's part of the tradition of the martial arts and the temple and the whole ambiance and pageantry that goes on with these styles of discipline, of learning it, right? And you're not just going in there learning to kick some guy's butt. There's usually a certain amount of philosophy and history that comes with it. So the fact that this is one of the first big movies to show it on screen, assuming it is, then yes, people probably looked at this and went, oh, we have to do that because that's how it's done. But I can't imagine they made it up for this movie. I'm sure it was drawn from some cultural reference point that, again, you and I just are not familiar with.
Right. So also the scene with the girls where that woman kind of brings around the harem of prostitutes and lets the guys take their pick. She brings one for Bruce Lee. And then John Saxon picks the head girl. And then I like to go to Jim Kelly. And he picks like 5 of them. He's like, I'll take you.
Yeah.
And you and you and you. and then they have that big fight with Han's fighters. And then it cuts to the guys in their rooms. And it's like, here comes the nudity. It's like, it's like those movies I used to watch in the 80s. Also, another scene that I really liked was when Jim Kelly's character was fighting Han. Because it's like, this Han, this older guy, man, he can fight.
Yeah.
And then it starts out, Han is basically, he's mad that someone snuck out at night.
Yeah.
Because he's like, it seems like one of you was not satisfied with the hospitality last night. Totally referring to the prostitutes, right? And he's like, you guys can never leave the island. And then Jim Kelly says to him, bullshit, Mr. Handman. It's just such a 70s line. It just stuck out to me. I thought that was really funny. The big scene I think everybody remembers in this movie, and you kind of alluded to it already, is the Hall of Mirrors.
Yeah.
Very stylistic. Hands down the most famous scene in the movie, I think. First of all, he like you mentioned, he gets his shirt ripped off. So he just takes it off. He's got to do it, shirtless, of course. And then John Saxon fights Han's best soldier and kills him. But then Bruce Lee basically takes on the entire army of the fighters and then goes into the Hall of Mirrors. And for an old guy, that guy can really fight. like these guys are all very well trained in martial arts, obviously. I like how Han replaces his hand with that fake hand with the metal blades. And he cuts Bruce Lee's face and his chest and to give him those lines on his body. I think that makes the scene iconic as well.
Yeah, and that's whenever you see like any of the stills, that's the part you see it from with the blood lines on his chest and on his face. Like, yeah, it's again, it's visually striking and it's another way to separate him from some of the other characters. I mean, I don't want to sound racist, but if you're trying to have a movie in the U.S. where the majority of the cast is Chinese, I got to think a lot of Americans, especially in 1973, are going to have a hard time, differentiating between a lot of the people. You get that whole face blindness thing where it's like, oh, I see all Asian people that look the same. And it's like, well, here's yet another way you can distinguish your absolute star. You put him in a different color, you take off his shirt, and you have him with these distinct cut bloodlines on it. It's like, you're not going to mix that guy up with the other 10 martial arts fighting guys around him. This is yet another way to make him stand out from the crowd more than just he does already because he's so good at the fighting and that he just, physically looks great. And, it's to your point, it's very stylistic.
When Han slashes at him and cuts Bruce Lee's stomach, the first thing that I thought was, I don't know how Bruce Lee's abs didn't break those metal blades. Like that guy was ripped. It reminds me of my own abs. I mean, Bruce Lee has a 6-pack, but I've got a 2-4.
I think yours is more of a keg there, buddy.
Yeah. And by the way, if you don't know, 2-4 is Canadian for a case of 24 beers. In case you're wondering what that was about. But one other thing about this scene too, you could tell that they didn't have a very big budget for makeup because the cuts on Bruce Lee's body just look like strips of red paint.
Yeah, and in some scenes they sort of seem to shift positions. Like they clearly had to do the scene over a long period of time, and they, under the lights and the movement, he was probably sweating a lot, so they probably had to keep reapplying them. And there's a few scenes where it's not as consistent. But you know what? Again, 1973, 50 years ago, I'm gonna forgive a lot of it. In the moment, you just sort of turn your brain off and enjoy it for what it is. I was fine with it.
So I can't believe, like I say, I've never seen this film until now, and I'm really, really glad I did. Derek, do you want to give it a rating out of 10?
I would give it a 9 all day long.
I would give this a 9 out of 10 as well. I really enjoyed this.
It's really good. Yeah, I felt it really held up, and it was good, start to finish.
Like I enjoyed it on a bunch of different levels too. Like it's kind of a cheesy action movie. It's got bad dubbing. Great fight scenes. Like it's got the stylistic direction. It's got boobs. It's got it all. Like everything's going on in this movie. I thought it was great. So
yeah, no, it was really good.
9 out of 10, both of us. All right, let's have some
fun with Caveman.
There is a common game that we like to play around here, and we're going to play it again. And it goes a little bit like this. Pick the flick. Yeah, pick the flick. You get the synopsis. Then pick the flick. You get the year. Pick the flick. All right, I'm going to give you the year and the synopsis, and you just guess the film. Okay, it's that
year
simple.
And synopsis, guess the film. Okay.
Yep, pretty straightforward. And the common thread, we always have one, is all these films have martial arts featured in the film.
Okay.
That's
okay. Not my
easy.
favorite genre, but
I know that's why I think some of them are easy. Some of them might be
okay. Good.
All right, so we're gonna start with some easy ones. 1984, a martial arts master agrees to teach karate to a bullied teenager.
Was that the first Karate Kid movie?
Yes, it was. Jumping right up to a newer movie, 2022. Ooh. A middle-aged Chinese immigrant is swept up into an insane adventure in which she alone can save existence by exploring other universes and connecting with the lives she could have led.
Yeah, great film. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
And I wanted to include
Chris, have you seen that one yet?
I have not, but you mentioned it the other week, so I was like,
yeah,
I want to throw that
nominated for Best Picture Oscar, and it has a really good chance of winning. So, no, it was very, very good. Definitely one of my favorite movies of the last year.
Wasn't Ke-Hai Kwan nominated for Best Actor or something in that
Absolutely.
film?
Best Supporting Actor, yeah.
Man, short round. That's so cool. All right, 1986. A rough and tumble trucker and his sidekick face off with an ancient sorcerer in a supernatural battle beneath San Francisco.
Is that John Carpenter, Big Trouble in Little China?
See, you're doing very well. Okay, 1990. Nice. 4 abnormal teenage heroes emerge from the shadows to protect New York City from a gang of criminal ninjas.
Is that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
It is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. See, you don't know martial arts movies, but you're doing awesome. Okay, 1995. 3 unknowing martial artists are summoned to a mysterious island to compete in a tournament whose outcome will decide the fate of the world.
Well, that sounds a lot like the movie we just watched.
It sounds like a ripoff for sure.
No kidding. I honestly have no idea. No idea.
It's Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat.
Ah.
All right, a couple more tough ones. I want to challenge you here. 1983, after helping the local police with some horse thieves, a Texas Ranger aims at a drug lord with arms trade as well. They're interested in the same woman, and they're both into martial arts.
Well, I got to think if it's Texas, it's probably starring Chuck Norris.
That was the clue. Texas Ranger.
So
1983.
Yeah, I don't really know Chuck Norris movies very well. So honestly, I can't even think of one. Don't know.
It's Lone Wolf McQuade.
Oh, okay. I've heard of that one.
Yeah.
Got it.
All right. 2000. That's a little bit more in your wheelhouse. All right. A Chinese man travels to the Wild West to rescue a kidnapped princess. After teaming up with a train robber, the unlikely duo takes on a Chinese trader and his corrupt boss.
What was the year?
2000.
Jeez. Did that one have Jackie Chan in it?
It might have.
I can picture the movie. I just can't think of the title. It was called, I don't know. It did have Owen Wilson as well. I can't think of the title. I don't know.
Shanghai Noon.
No, yeah, no. You could have given me all night. I never would have got that.
1988. An American martial artist serving in the military decides to leave the army to compete in a martial arts tournament in Hong Kong where fights to the death can occur.
Yeah, this one I knew was going to be on your list. Bloodsport.
Jean-Claude Van Damme. You nailed that one.
Yeah, no, that's a good one.
1994. Colonel Guile and various other martial arts heroes fight against the tyranny of dictator M. Bison and his cohorts.
Oh, was that not Street Fighter?
Jean-Claude Van Damme, you nailed another one.
Yeah, the only reason I know that is I just listened to a podcast where they were talking about why that character's name was Bison. And I was like, why would I ever need to know this? And look at that. I put it in practical application right here to get the question right.
Nice. All right, the last one, 1981. When Dr. Horatio Kane is kidnapped and is forced to create an army of martial artists, his daughter Candy Kane is the only one who could help. She enlists the help of Steve Chase to save her father and the day.
Oh my God, that sounds so terrible. I have no idea. That doesn't even sound familiar.
It's not terrible. It's Kill and Kill Again. One of my favorite movies of all time, man.
Well, you should have mentioned it at least once in this podcast. I might have got that.
Go figure. All right. So over the last 2 weeks, we've reviewed 2 films that celebrated their 50th anniversary. So I think it's over to you, Derek, to pick a newer film, a newer movie for us to watch, and then we'll come back and review next week. So what would you like me to
All right,
watch?
so I needed to just pick something that was fun and something that I had seen before that I hope you might like, and maybe you've even seen it, but I'm going to go with the nice, easy popcorn flick from 2017, Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, starring The Rock.
Oh, man, that's like a remake of the one that had Robin Williams back in the 90s, which I never saw either, but...
It's actually a sequel, which is
explained.
It's explained in the course of the movie. You don't need to have seen the first one, but they cover enough of it in the first 10 minutes that you're good to go. But this was really good. I really enjoyed this.
Okay.
They made a sequel to this one, but this is the first one, and it's available on Crave. I double checked, so you should have no problem finding it on the streamers.
I can watch it with my kids?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah. It's starring The Rock and Kevin Hart and Jack Black. No, it's really good. And I hope you like it. And we'll come back next week and talk about the ups and the downs.
So I'm going to watch this Jumanji. Was it Return to the Jungle?
Welcome to the Jungle.
Welcome to the Jungle. Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle with The Rock from 2017. And then we will come back. And that's definitely more newer than these 50-year-old movies that we've been watching. So it's a nice contrast there. So we'll come back next week and we'll do that. Until next week, this is Chris McBrien on behalf of myself and Derek Myers saying thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World. You can contact Chris and Derek at popgoesyourworld.com. Please take a minute and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.